told with the tournament referee, Brian Early. He listened to their concerns, but clearly, you know, this could be a watershed moment for men's tennis, women's tennis as well, that the players can get together and actually affect real change.
Where was David Ferrer, Jules Mueller, and Donald Young? Shouldn't they have been in there as well? It is great the players get together. All of them should have been in there. Out on our court here, grandstand, Andy Murray was out a good 4 or 5 minutes before Donald Young was, so there was definitely some confusion on getting the players here at the same time. And Andy Murray was complaining before the match even started that it was wet in the background. So the one thing is for sure, we're all part of the show. But when the court is wet or there is some issue or it is missing a little bit, they need to listen to the players and take it to heart. And hopefully, like I said, Patrick said, this will be a watershed moment where the players can come together. But I still was a little disappointed the other 3 players were not in that meeting.
Well, John, you certainly have plenty of experience in dealing with situations like this. So this is not the first time that we've seen something like this happen, but it's happening here in a big way.
Am I allowed, Patrick, to give a little history, tennis history now?
Yeah, give it to us, John.
All right.
Absolutely.
Remember that before 1972, Cliff will chime in on this when we're finished. Players had absolutely no power whatsoever. They were told what to do. As a matter of fact, most of the time, they barely paid them anything. Finally, in 72, we got a union. 73, Stan Smith, God bless him, he boycotted Wimbledon because of a player, Nicky Pilic, who was asked to play Davis Cup, chose not to play Davis Cup. And because he chose not to play Davis Cup, this federation suspended him for 6 months. The players showed that they had a backbone. They were willing. How many players, first of all, do you think would not defend their title the way Stan Smith did? It's the only time they'd ever won Wimbledon. They boycotted. They got a little bit of power, a key little bit. Late 70s, I came into the picture with guys like Connors, Vitas Gerulaitis, the late great Vitas Gerulaitis, Guillermo Vilas, Bjorn Borg. The agents got together. They said, we're not going to be pushed around. Let's face it, it matters what the top players want. That's what really matters. They're going to help the game, I believe, if the top players are happier. The agents went to the federations. We got a lot of things done. They wanted us to play every week. We would have played 52 weeks a year if it was up to these tournament directors and the federation. So finally we got to the Guess what, though? Can I go on or am I taking too long?
You're on a roll.
I'm on a roll. Thank you. So at that particular point, the agents got all the power. How in the world were agents representing the players, representing the tournaments, representing the sponsors, representing the TV people? These are the IMGs of the world, the pro-sirs at that time. The players sit back and say, that's completely absurd. Finally, later in the 80s, when guys were getting a little bit old and gray like myself, even Ivan Lendl, we sat outside the gate at the U.S. Open at Flushing Meadows. I think it was 1989. We had a guy by the name of Hamilton Jordan who was running the ATP, which has had basically very little power to this point. We finally had an opportunity to step up and say, this is, all the top players met the week before the Open. We said, we want to be involved with the major events. We want to be partners in the major events. We want to be part of the revenue sharing so that we can give pensions to the players that have absolutely nothing, that we could give some of this money to charity. It was some type of behind-the-scenes deal was struck where absolutely none of that took place. And we cut a deal with tournament directors, the non-Grand Slam tournament directors, where they said, look, there'll be 3 votes. 3 votes for tournament directors, 3 votes for the players. The deciding vote is the guy that runs the ATP, Hamilton Jordan. I personally disagreed along with the other top players. We should be involved in revenue sharing with the slams. We should be partners. Of course the slams don't want anything to do with that. What about a replay of a tournament when they replay all these matches? How about can the players don't get a piece of that? For the bench, not just for the top guys, because they can afford it. So I reluctantly agreed. I said, okay, we will accept what you're saying to us. We disagree with it totally. As a matter of fact, they made a system that was a best-of system when we said we wanted to play less. I said, at least we'll win the votes, Chris. 3-3, you'll win every vote. 4-3. Then they changed another rule that if it was 3-3, that wouldn't be passed. So what ended up happening is that major events are more powerful than they ever been, and they continue, I repeat, continue to push around the top players. And hopefully, oh wait, by the way, wasn't there a book, You Cannot Be Serious, where they said there should be a commissioner of tennis. You remember that?
Wait, you only got to the 80s, John.
I got to the 90s,
more
not
years
to
to
the
go.
players.
Okay.
Hey, John, I was in that meeting, and exactly what you said. That was one of those great meetings that we came out of a poker game with our pockets turned out upside down. We lost in that battle.
Well, guys, don't you think, though, that obviously there are massive issues in this sport. You just detailed some of it. There's the more specific issue about walking on a court that the players don't feel is safe. The organizers felt it was okay. Clearly, the players' issues and the players' opinion should trump everything else where their safety is involved. But the background for what you gave, the resentment of maybe the fact that there is so much money, especially in these slams, and that the players are just exploited a bit, that seems to feed into the attitude about this much smaller issue.
Especially when you're talking a guy who's trying to become he is one of the all-time greats in Rafael Nadal. He's trying to defend his U.S. Open title. What the hell difference does it make whether he comes out at 12 or 12 or 10? I mean, in the bigger scheme of things, look, we'll be happy to see matches today. Let's be honest. They knew pretty darn well that they were going to have there for a very, very short period of time. That goes without saying, Chris. You have to be extra careful for any of the players, not just the top players, any of the players in these conditions. And it's a shame it's come to that. However, I hope that what just happened will lead the players to get together, whoever it is, get some real leadership to go in so there eventually could be a partnership. We get treated worse than any other sport in terms of revenue sharing, by far. You know, and listen, by the way, Brad, you remember how much money did I win in 1979 when I won the Open? Take a guess.
Wait a minute, $34 grand.
$39,000 to win this.
Hey, John, until we get, listen, the head of the ATP who's now stepping down, and that position is open, until we get a commissioner, somebody that actually makes decisions. This 3-3 vote that it is, and he's the decider. I mean, the players, to me, still are not represented the way they should be. And the commissioner of football, commissioner of basketball, commissioner of baseball, when he makes decisions and does things, there's a lot more substance to it.
A lot of those commissioners, by the way, are all pretty unpopular with the players that are in those leagues.
By the way, Chris, there's no player union.
We have no player union.
There's no player union, and that's really the crux of the issue.
Well, let's get in Cliff and Darren over there. I'm sorry, Cliff, you were one of the pioneers, Cliff. You were one of the pioneers. Is this little day, when this specific issue about wet courts, do you see this as being some sort of a turning point, or no pun intended, a watershed?
Yeah, watershed. That's a good word, Chris. John, by the way, was very articulate in talking about the history of the ATP and where things really were born. And my feelings, though, and then what Patrick said is also quite true. The ATP is not a union. Because they own the tour outside of the Grand Slam tournament. So when the ATP goes to somebody like the U.S. Open or Wimbledon, for example, they are not in really any control of the situations. So bear in mind this, we are not talking about a union. I think that's really important. But Chris, you're bringing us back to what the crux of this matter is. These courts were not playable. I believe the players. I believe that that's true. These courts were not playable, and they shouldn't have gone out there that early.
Well, I think also, Cliff, you can't blame the USTA for when the rain does clear, trying to get the courts dry and thinking the courts were playable, getting the players on the court. But I think the real problem came even out here when we saw Andy Roddick come out here. He got onto the court and looked quite dry, and once he stepped on the court, he could see that it was still quite slippery. So he got the umpire down, the chair umpire, Carlos Bernardi, complained about it, obviously. He and Ferrer spoke about it. And when you have the players and the umpire all discussing whether or not it's playable or not, it's probably not playable. So they probably should have sent them back in or waited for 5 or 10 minutes to see if the rain did clear. Obviously, it was still looking pretty dodgy out there as well. But I agree with everything you guys just said there as well. And I found it really interesting that Rafael Nadal, the first thing he said when he came for that pre-match interview was the ATP. He blamed the ATP. Now, there's a lot of frustration there because I really think over the last few years there's been no real strong or visible leadership from the ATP. I think a commissioner of tennis would be great. I don't think it's going to happen in our foreseeable future, but whoever the ATP appoints next has to be a strong leader.
I think you said the players don't feel protected. That could apply to this small issue, but also to much bigger issues. You've had the top men comment because they're the ones who are on court. But for her part, Serena Williams via Twitter offering support, saying, "Preach, Rafael Nadal, preach." And then this is Serena's words, "My fellow booty brother, # go big butts, LOL." Those are Serena's word.
We like it. I like it a lot. Very nice.
So Serena at the top of the women's game offering her support for the positions taken by the top men here. Interesting conversation, guys. We enjoyed the history.
I'm happy I agreed more with Brad in that last 10 minutes more than I've had in a long time.
We can all agree that we'd like to see tennis, but not before 4 o'clock Eastern time, we're told here. And I actually do have those slam bonies out, so we'll try it again with a little cooperation and be back live after this on a frustrating day.